I can't say how long I sat slumped in that corner booth at the cafe, tears blurring the caramel brick walls of the shop, when a stranger appeared out of nowhere. He planted himself abruptly across from me, jutted his chest forward and fixed me with wide, intense eyes as if I were about to break into a run. I finally registered that my boyfriend Patty was still perched on the edge of the next booth, slumped into his phone. The man's voice was low but urgent. "I am the father of your child," he announced, as if delivering an invitation instead of a revelation. Time slowed. Patty's chair screeched backward so loudly that heads turned around to stare. The stranger didn't blink. He looked me up and down, taking in the dark circles under my eyes, the full curve of my very pregnant belly, and then he launched into a creepy monologue about how we had met at some guy's party. "You were wearing that blue dress you love. We talked about Netflix," he said, forcing certainty into every syllable. My brain short-circuited for a moment before I heard myself choking out, "Who are you?" My voice was hoarse, my pulse pounding in my throat. But the man hardly seemed to hear me. Instead, he jabbed a finger at Patty. "Your boyfriend is lying or you're crazy," he hissed, then stormed out before I could recover. Patty jumped up, chair skittering. His eyes were blazing with anger and confusion. He yelled, "You're lying. You're insane," after the stranger as he vanished through the doorway. It felt like a punch to my gut. I've never met him, I finally managed to stammer, though I saw the doubt flash in Patty's eyes. I also noticed a few heads in the cafe snickering or whispering, as if this was all a performance. I looked back toward the exit. The man had disappeared into the afternoon crowd. Patrons turned back to their newspapers and laptops, visibly shrugging off the disturbance as if it meant nothing. I buried my face in my hands. Afterward, as I sat trembling in the booth, Patty kept apologizing between sobs. "I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have reacted like that," he insisted. But something in his voice had permanently shifted. Something in us had shifted. As the adrenaline faded and reality set back in, I realized how radically my life had changed. A few months ago, I was a 22-year-old college senior, preoccupied with finals and weekend salsa classes. Now, I was 7 months pregnant, chased by strangers calling me delusional, dodging questions from family, losing my job, and living in fear every time the phone rang. Later that night, after the baby was asleep in her crib and Patty quietly apologized again, I lay on the living room couch staring at the ceiling. Shadows from the streetlight danced against the white plaster. Where did this nightmare even begin? I whispered to the emptiness around me. Several months earlier, I remembered the first time I even entertained the possibility of being pregnant. It was finals week, and I had been running on little more than panic and lukewarm coffee for days. I cupped a calloused hand to my forehead, pulling a messy bun loose in frustration. Why was I so tired all the time? Why did my stomach lurch every morning? I chalked it up to stress. Stressing about staying awake was ironically exhausting. Plus, hadn't I just had Chinese takeout at Panda Express? That was bound to have someone queasy the next day. I was proud of many things about myself, but being a college virgin at 22 was near the top of that list. My first serious boyfriend, Patty, we'd been careful, but we'd never gone all the way. So when my hands shook after the 10th day of each morning bringing up nothing but anxiety and indigestion, I finally broke down and bought a pregnancy test on a midnight errand. I tucked into the bathroom and tried not to think of all the hours I'd spent massaging my throbbing head and stomach this past week. I waited with my shoulders hunched, heart hammering, telling myself this was silly. It was impossible. It shouldn't be surprising then that when the little pink plus sign appeared, I could only laugh. It took a full minute to realize I was actually staring at 2 lines. My knees buckled and I landed on the cool tile floor. I gasped, more confused than relieved or terrified. That's not right. It couldn't be. I clutched the test as though it had just shattered my sense of reality. My breath came in shallow gasps, and for a moment I was convinced the test was broken. But I'd done it correctly, hadn't I? I had it lying side up under the bathroom sink light. I remembered the panic that followed that tiny paper revelation. I shouted into the empty apartment, "Patty, you have to come home." He arrived within minutes, a mouthful of stew still halfway to his mouth from dinner. When he saw me on the bathroom floor, crying with disbelief, I think he might have thought it was a joke at first. We had both always laughed nervously about the possibility of me defying odds and getting pregnant despite everything we'd done. But as I forced him to listen to the recording of those first tests, 20 of them, showing positive again and again, his joke face vanished. He put a steadying hand on my shoulder as I cried against him. "I don't get it either," he said quietly. "You said we were safe, we didn't." His voice trailed off, choking on the impossibility. The next morning, to be safe, I went to the student health clinic. Heart pounding, I waited in a stark white room while a technician, her face impassive, confirmed on the ultrasound screen the faint flicker that was our baby's heartbeat. 8 weeks pregnant, she said simply. I couldn't help but laugh out loud, a hysterical, hollow sound. "You made a mistake," I told her. "There's no way I'm pregnant." I tried to stand, but the room spun. The technician frowned, surprised. The doctor's expression behind her mask shifted from routine detachment to a mild alarm as she ordered immediate follow-up tests. I followed her out into the hallway, clutching my purse like a life raft. She laid out the plan quickly. Blood tests, hormone levels, thyroid panel, everything. She ordered them urgently, almost with an edge. I nodded numbly, hardly hearing her over the sound of my own racing heartbeat. One by one, the tests came back. My thyroid levels were normal. My hormone panel was normal. My pap smear was normal. I didn't even need to mention, I thought. I felt my cheeks flush every time a nurse or doctor entered the room. They all wore looks of confusion as I sat on the exam table going over the results. Everything looked perfectly like I should be pregnant, except that I knew I wasn't. The test results piling up on the counter eventually made it onto my desk at home, for my eyes only. I photocopied them for Patty as he waited on my couch one sleepless night. He rubbed my back while I stared at the numbers, not knowing whether to hope or prepare for the worst. "I just don't understand," I whispered. Days later, I finally broke down and told my mother on a quick phone call at dawn, between classes. Her reaction was like being slapped. Her voice, still drowsy, cracked as soon as I finished my sentence. "What? How could that even be?" she said. I heard her gathering herself. "Are you serious?" I insisted, disbelieving that yes, I was serious. One day later, she was on my doorstep with my dad, dressed in her usual pale blue jogging suit, eyebrows pinched. She said, "All right, just tell us who the father is." The disappointment in her voice was exactly the same tone she used when I once lied about going to a party at 16. Dumbfounded, I managed, "Mom, I told you. That's the thing. I'm telling the truth." Dad said nothing. He just stood at the edge of the room, arms folded, a silent rock. Patty looked between me and my parents, silent himself, like he was trying to comprehend everything at once. I burst into tears again. I must have seemed so pathetic, so broken. I felt like screaming that there couldn't possibly be a father. We had been so careful. After that, life turned surreal. I began to suspect I was losing my mind. Afraid that maybe I was sleeping-walking somehow, I set up my phone by the bed each night and recorded myself. The next morning I'd watch the video, hoping to find some clue. Maybe I was sleepwalking, maybe there was some flash of an hour missing. But every time I fast-forwarded through the footage, I only saw me asleep in bed, tossing and turning from cramps or nausea. I even gave my boyfriend all my phone passwords and let him see my browsing history, just so he would have to believe me. Patty looked at me with a mixture of concern and suspicion. I caught the doubt flicker in his eyes every time I flinched from pain or when I gagged on the smell of my coffee. Maybe even he thinks I'm lying, I thought. The silence between us grew heavier. I hated that he was doubting me, but I couldn't blame him entirely. How could I not question this? When dinner table conversation at home devolved into side eyes and tight-lipped stares, I started learning how to hold my tongue until I was alone. I started a journal, scribbling down everything that happened each day. How many naps I took, how hungry I was, doctor appointments, even the weird boy I saw who started following me home. But I never recorded that, not yet. That revelation was still too fresh to write about. One night in early spring, when I was still nearly 2 months along and on a break from class, Patty and I sat in a tiny cafe, the same one where the stranger confronted me weeks later. I let my head rest on my palm and the tears came unbidden. All the stress, shame, confusion. I was exhausted. Suddenly a tall, sharp-featured man approached. He wore a rumpled navy suit and something hard in his dark eyes. I flinched at first, worried he was just another stranger pestering me. Instead, he made a strange looping gesture with his finger and said calmly, "I am the father of your child." My sobbing escalated. I stood up so fast my chair skidded back. Both Patty and the stranger yelped at the same time. I just threw my coffee mug across the table at him. It wasn't a cool reaction. I'm sure the mug only chipped, but I was too shocked to care. The man looked surprised, his face split into a bemused grin. "Remember we hooked up at that guy's party sometime this year?" he said, still smiling. "You were wearing that outfit you said you love, and we talked about Netflix." Patty roared in anger. "What are you talking about?" "You're insane," he said, swiveling the chair so he was blocking me behind him. I had never seen this man before in my life. The silver teeth on his grin made him look even creepier. All anyone could do was stare as he leaned in, practically growling into my ear. "I know it was you. I recognize your voice," he said. When I didn't respond, his grin faltered, quickly turning into a mask of frustration. He spit, "I'm not playing games. Either you get real or you get gone." Then he turned and walked away, pulling a leash of flame-red hair behind him. When he slammed the door behind him, everyone in the cafe burst into sudden chatter, and some even laughed, as if I had been pranked. I was mortified. Patty was furious, and he helped me to my feet and practically carried me out, leaving a shower of confetti-colored stir sticks skittering across the floor. I was trembling. Outside, the cold spring air hit my wet cheeks like a slap. I cried into Patty's jacket as we walked to the car. How is this my life now? Over the next few days, I felt like the entire world had turned upside down. The police were involved next. The idea of it almost made me sob again. The very concept that I was somehow a victim of rape was something I could barely process through the haze of my own shock. But I had insisted. If this stranger had grabbed me, I needed that documented. Not to press charges, but so no one could accuse me of lying. So, even though it felt humiliating, the authorities took a sexual assault kit and ran a toxicology screen on me. The word rape kit felt heavy on my tongue when I asked a nurse about it the morning after. She gave me a sympathetic look, like maybe she had seen it all. It came back clean. Absolutely nothing in my blood. I felt oddly let down by that. It meant no traces of anything. No drugs, no assault. I wanted it to have something, I think, because then at least there was some evidence I could hold on to. Police detectives interviewed me several times. Each time, they looked at me like I was disturbed. One detective had bags under her eyes and leaned too close as she flipped through my journal. She muttered phrases like delusional and potential harm to child on her pad, and when I caught her eye, her mouth snapped shut. I stared her down, furious, then refused to speak without my lawyer present. The officer said he was worried about my health, and I flashed him my records showing perfectly normal chemistry. That seemed to confuse him, so I locked my lips again. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, Johns Hopkins called. Genetic specialists were flying in to run tests that, I was assured, had never even been performed on a human before. That sounded ominous. I was wheeled into sterile exam rooms day after day for ultrasounds and more blood draws, always propped up on pillows in a gown that left my legs cold. Doctors and lab techs scuttled around with whispering voices as if I weren't on the table. Every time I handed over another vial of blood, I felt like a science experiment. Meanwhile, word leaked about the virgin pregnancy girl, like I was some freak in a horror movie. Pro-choice protesters showed up at my parents' house holding signs with placards spelling out liar and impure, and even one that said, the fetus is an alien. My mother locked herself in her room crying, refusing to answer the door or phone for days. It was all so overwhelming. I lost count of the nights I stayed up. In my darkened apartment, the only light the green digits of the clock reading 3 a.m., I would rock back and forth on the floor, praying for anything normal in my life to reappear. Instead, the phone would buzz or the doorbell ring, and my heart would leap in fear, expecting another confrontation, another piece of ridicule. I can't say there was one single moment that felt like the middle or the climax. Life just spiraled, a series of screams and accusations. The peak of my desperation, the place where I finally toppled, was ironically on the morning the baby was born. In an unexpectedly quick labor, I found myself alone at dawn in a small hospital room, with only my father holding my hand as Patty paced outside the door. He panicked at hospitals. When the doctor announced I was fully dilated, Dad seemed to snap out of a daze. He wiped his palms on his jeans, eyes surprisingly bright. When the baby slipped into my arms, healthy and screaming at 1 minute old, I felt a soothing calm wash over me for the first time in months. She had 10 tiny fingers with perfect fingernails and 10 toes curled in pink. Her cry was loud and strong, a beautiful, defiant wail. I couldn't help crying again. Happiness this time, overwhelming gratitude mixed with sadness. Relief, too, that the end of this long journey was finally here. What will we do now? I whispered into the little soft blanket I'd swaddled her in. Dad smiled stiffly and said, she deserves family, offering me a tiny teddy bear from the hospital shelf. That simple promise from him, even without words about what he meant, was what I needed. Patty arrived and we shared a look neither of us could trust with words yet, but it was somewhere in our eyes. My baby was here. Our baby was here. After that first chaotic week of newborn exhaustion, Dad moved in. My studio apartment wasn't big, but he insisted on staying. He set up a grimy old sofa in the corner of my living room and never complained. Every night he pumped milk or burped her so I could sleep. Each morning I cooked pancakes and oatmeal while he did the laundry. Even doing chores together felt new. But both of us avoided, without even saying it, the question that hung over us in those quiet moments. Who was this father everyone demanded I name? We pretended it was just my secret. All I really had was routine. Dad holding the baby during my quick showers, me chopping broccoli while he washed dishes. I'd sneak glances at him now and then, trying to read his face. He never brought up the father. I didn't push. I was too scared of what I might unleash. Yet every so often he'd say something strange. One evening, about a month after the birth, I sat beside him on the kitchen floor as he stared at our sleeping baby. In the half-light of the lamp, his eyes were big and unreadable. Finally he said softly, she has your grandfather's eyes. I nodded, forcing a smile, though my stomach dropped. My grandfather, I had been named after him, died before I was born. I'd only seen one grainy black and white photo of him wearing an old fishing hat. I squinted at my daughter, but there was nothing obviously alike. Dad immediately looked away. I mean your mother's eyes, he quickly corrected himself. The way he said it felt unnatural, like he was digging through his mind for something to say. I swallowed and smiled weakly at him. Okay, I said, nodding, trying to dispel my growing worry. Maybe I had just jumped to a weird conclusion. 2 days later, I woke up groggy and not quite ready to face the day, to the sound of Dad on the phone. He was whispering, voice frantic, saying, "I told you never to call me again." It was enough that I slammed the bathroom door closed, heart thudding. I looked in the mirror, palm pressed to my chest. I walked out to the kitchen just as he ended the call abruptly. My voice wavered. Who was that? He bit his lip and didn't answer right away. I followed his eyes to the floor and back up. Finally, he said, "Nobody you know. An old family friend. Nothing important." I didn't believe him. Old family friend sounded like a lie weighing on his tongue. That afternoon, as I sorted medical bills, I noticed Dad pacing around the living room, staring at our baby girl. His expression was every bit as strange as I'd seen a few nights before. "What's wrong?" I asked, folding a stack of envelopes. He started at the sound of my voice, like he'd forgotten I was home, and almost dropped the envelope he was holding. "Nothing," he said. "Just tired." His voice cracked under the lie. I wanted to press but held back. Instead, I watched him hold our daughter close and hum a lullaby I'd never heard. He didn't notice I was watching him carefully. The tune was soft and fearful, as if he were comforting her through a dream. Why is he acting like this? That same night, barely able to sleep, I rolled over on the couch and pretended to snooze while Dad took the baby for her midnight feed. I listened to every small movement through the baby monitor, the soft click of the nursing chair, the faint rustle of the diaper bag, his low voice cooing. At one point, he shifted and I heard him whisper in Russian or Polish, I couldn't tell, probably a lullaby from his childhood. Another sentence drifted through the walls. "You're safe now, little one." My eyes flew open. That line exactly echoed what I had heard months ago in an old lullaby video my grandmother used to sing to me, a fragment I had half recalled. I sat up slowly. My heart was racing as I realized Dad was saying things to the baby that he never said to me. Only me. He must have known I was listening, because he cleared his throat loudly. Dad kept glancing over at me as he fed her, worry painting his face. I sat there, holding my breath. Who did he really think he was comforting? Why was he acting so terrified? And what exactly did he know? By morning I had steeled myself to find out. After Dad left for the store, I quietly crept around the apartment to see if I could find anything that might explain his behavior. Under the sofa, behind old boxes, in the bottom of his suitcase, I found absolutely nothing about our history. I opened my laptop and searched for grandfather obituary. Only one result came up, an obituary notice from 32 years ago. It mentioned my grandfather's name, his years of life, survived by his wife and daughter, and that was it. No photo, no details. It was as if he'd never existed at all. When Dad returned, I confronted him. I had the obituary up on my phone and showed it to him. "Who was that man whose name I'm named after?" I said, voice trembling. He stared at the phone, then back at me. His face was pale. He said nothing for a long moment, then quietly, "He was your grandfather." "That's enough, Sarah." His tone was clipped, avoiding my eyes as he said it. I said, voice raising, "But why can't I see any photos of him? Where are the pictures of Grandpa? You keep saying he looks like Hermit and the baby. Where are they?" Dad's fingers tightened around the baby he was holding. "He's in storage at your mother's house," he said finally. His words were slow, like he was trying to remember them right. "Old family photos, you know?" My mind screamed a lie. "We both know that's not true. Mom won't even talk to me." I snapped. The baby started crying just as I burst into tears. "Stop lying." He stood up, burping her with one hand, walking back toward the living room. "I can't talk about it," he said. His face crumpled, voice choking. "Sarah," he whispered. "Please don't ask." Every instinct screamed at me to demand answers, but I had to think of my daughter's comfort first. I scooped her into my arms as Dad retreated to the kitchen, shoulders shaking. My hands shook too, hugging her tighter as she sniffled against my chest. She looked so peaceful, safe in my arms, even as my world was crumbling. Later, I sat on the floor in the dim living room, guilt sinking in. Maybe I shouldn't be pushing him. He's the only one helping me raise this baby. And yet, there was something deeply wrong. Over the next week, I decided to follow Brody Hensley's advice. My sympathetic attorney, who had taken my case through legal aid, had the single stripe of common sense I clung to. "Document everything," he had said softly as I sat in his cramped office, baby nestled in a sling on my chest and Dad pretending to read magazines on the other side of the desk. Every weird conversation. Every strange phone call. It needs to be a paper trail. That night, I installed a recording app on my phone. I hated myself the second I hit accept. Spying on my father felt wrong, but I had no choice. So I began 2 parallel tactics: dad guilt and quiet surveillance. The first was my nightly prayer that my father would come clean out of his own guilt. The second was setting up phone recordings, carefully legal but frankly unsettling. For several days, Nothing incriminating was caught. He was as nice to my face as ever, cooking dinner, changing diapers. Occasionally he'd glance at the phone I held just out of frame and I'd hide it behind a recipe. I felt awful. I was a daughter-gone spy, and yet this wasn't just about me. It was for my baby. Then, on the third day after starting this, he did it again. I was at the far side of the room, folding laundry next to the crib, when I heard him say softly to the baby, "She really does have your grandfather's nose." I froze mid-fold. My foot nudged a doll on the floor. I whipped around to face him. "Dad?" I've never seen a picture of Grandpa," I said evenly. He suddenly turned white. He let the diaper fall from his hands. He opened his mouth, then closed it. His eyes darted around my apartment like he was searching for a photo album that definitely wasn't there. The baby started to fuss, and I realized I needed to act normal. "There must be old albums somewhere," I said calmly, masking how terrified I was inside. Dad backed away from me, out of the changing area, holding the baby out in front of him protectively. "I think there's some old pictures, but, at your mother's," he said quickly. My heart thundered. "In storage at Mom's," he added, trying again. "You know that's a lie. She won't even answer our calls," I said, voice low but urgent. The baby started crying for a fresh diaper. I grabbed the diaper off the couch. Dad flinched when I held the baby next to him. "Let me help you," I said, blocking his way to the changing table with a calm that fooled no one. He gave the baby to me and covered his face with his hands. "All right, okay," he said shakily. "Okay." I took a deep breath, letting the tension ease just slightly as I focused on cleaning my child. "I want the truth, Dad," I said, voice breaking. "Not more lies." When I looked up, he was standing a few feet away. There were tears on his cheeks. He shook his head slowly. And then, holding himself together with all his might, he muttered, "I can't tell you yet." I hate how powerless that made me feel. I could sense he was bursting at the seams to explain something, but he wouldn't say it. He couldn't yet. And yet he was crying on our kitchen floor with the mother of his grandchild in front of him demanding answers he had no choice but to bury for a while. All I could do was cry with him, because God, it was so hard to be angry when he looked so broken and still not know what the hell he meant. A few days later, when I was folding a fresh pile of baby clothes, someone in a hooded sweatshirt knocked on our door. It was early morning. The sun wasn't even up yet. I wiped sleep from my eyes as Dad shuffled over. Through the peephole, I saw a woman in a navy blazer holding a clipboard. "Social worker," she said crisply. I opened the door for her, blinking blearily. She stepped inside with swift efficiency, clipboard out. I stood there holding the baby, who had definitely been napping, on my hip, wearing a nightshirt and sports shorts that were in dire need of a wash. I made a mental note of how pathetic I must have looked and forced myself to smile. The woman introduced herself and explained she needed to do a home check for the ongoing investigation, as part of her job. Inside, Dad had already slipped back into the bedroom, pretending to read, presumably so he wouldn't get dragged into anything weird. She began going through the apartment methodically, noting the sleeping arrangements, crib and corner with baby's mobile, her name in block letters on the door. She asked who lived here, and when I said, "Just me and my dad," I watched her pencil pause. She eyed Dad critically when he appeared briefly in the hallway with the laundry basket. "Why is your father living here?" she asked. I swallowed. "He's helping with the baby. Since I don't have family support, he's been staying." I lied with as neutral a tone as I could muster. She asked to see baby's cabinet. I opened a cupboard filled with diapers and formula. She gave a clipboard note. "Medication?" "None." She peeked at my fridge. One shelf had leftovers in plastic containers. Another shelf was nearly bare except for milk and juice. This was agonizing. I scrunched up my face in pain when she fished out some expired yogurt. "Oh, I'll have to throw that away," I mumbled. For 40 tedious minutes, she asked me pointed questions. "How are you coping emotionally? Do you have friends or family helping? Why do you think strangers are knocking on your door?" She made notes after each answer. All the while, Dad sat on the couch stone-faced, barely participating. I guess that's one plus for me. He wasn't saying anything weird that day. Just staring her down with his jaw set, like he was daring her to write something negative about us. By the end, the social worker gave me a curt nod and said she'd file her report. Then she turned and left, still muttering into her phone about a very unusual case. When the door clicked shut, I sank onto the couch with a sigh of relief. The baby gurgled at me from her bouncy seat on the floor. I looked over at Dad. He was still sitting there, quietly, face unreadable. For a moment we just looked at each other, side by side on the couch. I realized I was suddenly exhausted, all the energy drained out of me. I'd slept sitting up at least half the night, half listening at the wall. It was clear, I needed help beyond what one stressed-out father could give, especially if he was hiding something dangerous. I put the baby down again, wrapped in her swaddle, and opened my phone. After some digging, I found the number of the single mom support group we'd gotten from prenatal classes. It turned out Jessie Norton, an older woman I'd met briefly in an English class, ran a weekly meeting downtown. The first meeting of the month happened in 2 days. At midnight, having read too many self-help articles online, I texted her, "Hi Jessie, this is my name from the parenting class. Are you still meeting on Thursdays? I could really use the support group." She replied immediately, "Yes, we are. You're more than welcome. We meet at 6 p.m. Thursday at the community center." I let myself cry, relief and terror mixing in a jumble. Thursday night felt like forever away, but I forced myself to sleep that night for once. I felt an odd hope that maybe other people in that circle might help me feel sane again. Thursday came at last. Our apartment was silent that afternoon. Dad was about to take the baby for a walk, and I could feel him tense up again at whatever conversation might have been going on in his head. I hugged him as I handed him the diaper bag. "Thank you, Dad," I said softly. "I'll be back soon." He just nodded, bracing himself. I walked out into the bright evening, nervous. There wasn't much light in that circle of support group mothers. The church basement smelled like coffee and crumbs. 8 chairs were arranged in a circle, for other young moms sat in them. They were talking quietly as I entered. When one of them recognized me from class, she gave me a weary smile. Another introduced herself, a woman a few years older named Karen with her baby on her lap. "I'm Sarah," I said, sitting down and rocking the baby in my arms. My heart seemed to beat too loud in the silence that followed, but it was going to be okay. No one knew the weird details here. Jessie, a kind-eyed woman in her 40s, asked each of us to share. One by one we told brief stories, custody battles, financial struggles, that sort of thing. One mom quietly mentioned her ex-husband was in jail, another joked about her baby waking at 5 a.m. for a bottle. They nodded sagely at each other. When it was my turn, my throat felt tight. All I said was, "I'm a single mom dealing with, well, a lot of family drama right now." I let it drop there. I couldn't have put it into words if I'd tried. The room was unbelievably understanding. One of the women even held my hand when I trailed off, giving me a squeeze. It was some small comfort to see that no one there looked at me like I was lying or insane. They all just understood mom's stress. A woman named Maria, who had been through an ugly divorce, opened her battered binder and showed it to me. "See," she said, "this is how I keep organized for court. Medical records, appointments, receipts, even notes in a parenting journal. Everything dated. It saved my custody case." She pointed at tabs labeled financial records, witness statements. My hands curled around my coffee mug, palms sweaty. I realized I hadn't kept track of anything except trying not to pass out each day. I looked over at Dad, who was sitting half-hunched with his face in his palms, clearly not part of this group but doing a good job pretending to read a magazine in the car outside. For once, in that moment I felt empowered. Jessie leaned close after the group and whispered, "If you want, you should do something similar. It might help with the courts." She smiled kindly. "We've got some supplies upstairs if you need anything. And if you ever need someone to call, I'm here." We packed up after that. On the drive home, everything felt a little lighter. I felt nearly courageous enough to start fresh and do as they advised. So I did. As soon as we walked in the door, I got out of my jeans and sat on the kitchen floor among a heap of bags and tossed baby clothes. I pulled out every receipt from the past months, doctor bills, grocery slips, phone records. In between giving bottles, I sorted them into categories. We got a small accordion file with labels: medical, legal, emotional. I even found an old camera and snapped photos of her feeding, sleeping, milestones, anything that could prove she was healthy and loved. I wrote down conversations in a diary. The day Dad repeated the line about Grandpa's nose, the day the stranger showed up at the doctor's office. It was all there, now, documented in black and white. It felt strange to do it at first, like I was plotting an expose on my own life. But in a way, I was. I realized I had to trust myself and this paperwork to protect my daughter, more than I trusted all the sidelong glances from doctors. Maybe it was also how I grounded myself, bit by bit. A few days later, my phone pinged with a text from Brody. I held it and waited for him to say what I already knew. He was going to serve Patty with papers for a paternity test. Sure enough, his text said exactly that. He had sent papers to a process server who had found Patty at his quiet little bakery apartment, and Patty had refused to accept the package at first. But the process server had explained that if he didn't take it, he could be held in contempt of court. So Patty begrudgingly took the papers. In the kitchen, I was stacking boxes of formula into the pantry. When Dad walked in from changing the baby, I saw the tension snap on his face as he overheard that name. He asked in a quiet rage, "Why are you involving him? He can't be the father." My heart lurched. I grabbed my notepad and scribbled down exactly what he said. His face was red as he glared at me. "You're only making it worse for yourself," he yelled. "Everyone's laughing behind your back. Just stop this nonsense." I felt tears burn in my eyes. Angry tears, sad tears, terrified tears all at once. The baby started crying in her crib just then. We both jumped to soothe her. When Dad picked her up, I finally saw the look on his face. It was anger and fear mixed together, something I had never seen in him before. I didn't know whether it was pity for me or anger at me. That night, as I sat nursing her to sleep on the couch, I stared at the ceiling. I was exhausted. I couldn't think straight. I had to know what the hell was going on with my own father. So I waited until he fell asleep on the sofa next to me. Around 10:30 p.m., I crept over to our bedroom, quietly unlocked his laptop, he was such a poor password protector, and checked his browser history. I knew it was a terrible thing to do, but I was desperate. The next morning, I burst into the living room, a folded piece of paper in my hand and a furious look on my face. On it was a phone number to a certified counselor and some scribbled letters I couldn't quite make out. Dad was halfway through dinner when I confronted him. The baby fidgeted on his lap. I stabbed my finger at his chest. "Who are you talking to? Why won't you tell me?" My voice cracked, eyes blazing. He looked pained, on the verge of tears again. I wanted to help," he whispered, voice trembling. I blinked back guilt momentarily, remembering all the times he had saved me water for baths and cooked dinner. But immediately it was replaced by rage. Help? By refusing me the truth. I felt completely over the edge. The baby started fussing, and Dad quieted her with one hand. "He's calling about the pregnancy," he blurted out without looking at me. They say they know something, but I don't know who." My hands went cold. "He's a patient," I whispered. Dad finally met my eyes and confessed, "It's someone my brother Frank told me about years ago. Something in our family." He shook his head, stammering, "I promise never to talk about it." He started to cry. "I'm trying, I swear. I'm trying to protect you both," he choked out. My own tears blurred my vision as I cradled my baby. "Protect us from what?" "Dad, what's in our family?" He hugged me tight, rocking me and my daughter against his chest. I'm sorry. I should have told you. But I didn't want you to think we're cursed or anything. You know how my parents are." The words lifted something heavy in my chest. Frank. I had never heard of this brother. "What are you talking about?" Dad only shook his head. "Things my family had. Genetic issues. Your mother and I cut ties." He gave my shoulders a gentle squeeze. "I'll tell you everything someday, I promise. But I don't want anyone hurting you or her over it." That night, I held our daughter extra tight. My grandfather's face floated in my mind again. Did he know something? Did Dad know something? But little by little, as I watched Dad tend to our sleeping baby, I realized he was frightened too. Worried maybe. If there was some buried secret, I was glad I hadn't pushed him so far that he shut down entirely. Even in the dark quiet of our apartment, I could feel something shifting. The next morning, I made myself a strong cup of coffee and called the genetic counselor, Dr. Gianna Figueroa, who had been so kind in the hospital. She put me on speakerphone. "Hi, Sarah. How is baby and mama?" she said warmly, though I could hear the surprise in her voice. "I have good news and more stuff to discuss." She explained that the initial set of tests from months ago had indeed been called into question. The lab that did them had a contamination problem. In fact, they'd been cited by the state for exactly that kind of error. There was even a pending class action lawsuit against them now. Dr. Figueroa wouldn't go into details, but from what I gathered, she meant that maybe our bizarre results could have been lab error after all. As improbable as that sounded, I nearly wept at the thought. If it was only that, if it wasn't me, if I hadn't lost everything over nothing, maybe I could finally breathe again. She continued that baby's DNA results were coming back completely normal, not chimeric or mutated. They had to send them to a high-end lab overseas for a final confirmation, but she was optimistic. I felt my chest unclench. She handed me a lawyer's contact for the class action, just in case I wanted to recover some of the costs. It sounded tempting, even if I doubt much money would make up for months of hell. I thanked her and hung up, a mix of relief and exhaustion flooding over me. I sat on the couch staring at the wall. Normal. The word seemed foreign, as if it was made of crystal. For so long I'd been living in a nightmare. When Dad came home from work, I barely said anything. I just handed him a pile of bills sorted into an envelope. I wanted to focus on the baby. He watched me for a long time, eyes full of something I couldn't quite read yet. He gently touched my arm. "Thank you," he whispered. The baby pulled at his glasses and he played with her toes, a wistful smile on his lips. "We'll get through this," he added softly. 2 weeks later, the day of Patty's paternity test, I found a tiny strength. Under the bright fluorescent lights of the courthouse clinic, we sat across from each other, me holding the baby in one arm, Patty's lawyer smoking a cigarette in a corner. Patty himself sat stiff, wearing a wrinkled shirt and looking thoroughly miserable. I cradled our daughter as the nurse explained the swabbing procedure. Open the cheek swab, collect cells, seal it. Patty went first. His face was pale as he unscrewed his mouth guard for me, eyes on the floor as he opened wide. Then it was the baby's turn. She started bawling the second that little Q-tip tickled her cheek. I held her mouth shut softly as the nurse collected the swabs, murmuring soothing nonsense. Patty's mom huffed. I saw her lip curl. "This is entrapment," she muttered, but she didn't touch us. No one would dare. That awful, hour-long wait felt like forever. Dad paced outside the room, running his hands through his hair. He wouldn't look at me. Every few minutes, I could feel his stare burning through the door, like he wanted to tackle me. When I peeked, he just gave a tight wave. He offered to drive me home, but I had my own car. I said I'd walk from here. He pouted and said, "Let me give you a ride," with that same stifled worry. We drove in tense silence, the baby sleeping in her car seat. Only when we parked and walked up to the apartment did he speak. "They said 2 weeks," I told him quietly as we climbed the stairs. He nodded, still not meeting my eyes. "I know," he said, voice low. Something about the way he said it made my skin prickle. Not missing anything, probably. He was probably just nervous too. I tried to force normalcy. I picked up my mail that afternoon, the last delivery. In the stack was a thick envelope from the genetics lab. My fingers shook as I cut it open at the kitchen table. Dad stood behind me, pretending to read a cereal box. There were a few pages of legal jargon. My eyes skimmed the lines looking for the word positive. And there it was, paternity test results, 99.9% probability match. Patty had been the father, completely. The lab used his full name, written in plain print. The probability was on the official letterhead. I sank onto the wooden chair. This was not how I expected to feel. The very idea seemed impossible in my mind. "No, this can't be," I whispered. Dad saw my face and came around. He gently put a hand on my shoulder. I let him read the page over my shoulder. His eyes flicked wide, then softened. He didn't say anything. I stared at the numbers again. We had never had sex. Not once. Never inside the same room even, except to hold hands or kiss goodbye. Swallowing hard, I pulled the baby onto my lap and called Dr. Figueroa's number. This time my voice was steadier. "Gianna? I need to ask you something weird. The test says Patty is the father. But how? Could it be a lab mistake?" Her quiet laughter came over the line kindly. "It's happened before, but it's extremely rare. Did you two have intimate contact, just not all the way?" My cheeks burned. I swallowed twice. We did everything except finish," I admitted, uncomfortable. She said gently. "There's something called de-errant from intercourse sex. Pre-ejaculate fluid can contain sperm. It's rare, maybe 1 in a million chance, but it happens." My mind reeled, 1,000,000 to 1. I remembered every detail of those moments we thought were safe. All the times we thought we had avoided pregnancy. I buried my face against my daughter and wept. Relief spilled out in sobs, but it was also a joy that I couldn't bottle up. I laughed and cried at once, thanking God and Gianna for finally giving me a normal answer. When I hung up, I felt like the weight of the world had lifted. Dad put his arms around me and our baby. "I knew she was supposed to be here," he whispered, letting himself finally share in my relief. We stayed like that, the three of us, for a long time. Later that evening, I carefully took out my phone and typed a formal email to Patty's lawyer, attaching the PDF of the result. My hands still shook from the adrenaline. I wrote the words, "Thank you for forwarding these results. Based on this 99.9% paternity, I am requesting that Patrick acknowledge parental responsibility and begin paying child support as required by law. Please have your client contact me through our attorneys to arrange a reasonable schedule." It felt oddly calm to sign my name at the bottom. For the first time in a year, it felt like something made sense. 2 days passed. The phone rang at breakfast. It was Brody again, sounding sharp. He told me not to panic. Patty wanted to meet and talk about co-parenting arrangements. Relieved, I asked to meet with Patty in his office, with both lawyers present. He agreed. We set the day and time when Dad could watch the baby, because now, he was my lifeline to support. The morning of the meeting, I put on the one decent dress that still fit and brushed the tangles from my hair. The baby cooed in her stroller as I left. Dad loaded her in his truck with a booster seat strapped on. At the lawyer's office, everyone waited stiffly around a conference table. Patty sat across from me, face pressed to his phone screen again. When I walked in, he looked up slowly, jaw tightening, then gave me a small nod. After some awkward chit-chat from the lawyers, Patty finally spoke first. I'm sorry for how I acted," he said quietly. "This whole thing. I just couldn't believe it. I thought I was going crazy." His voice broke. His eyes met mine with genuine regret. "I shouldn't have yelled at you. I was just confused." I took a deep breath. "It's okay. None of this was your fault," I replied softly. He gave a stiff nod. Then he slid a piece of paper across the table to me, a printout of his online banking statement. I stared at it confused. He cleared his throat. "I set up automatic deposits for $200 a month. It's not much, I'm still in college, but it's a start." He stared at his folded hands. "I'm not ready to be a dad right now," he admitted. "I need time to figure things out for myself. But I will help." I realized I was shaking. I closed my eyes, blinking back tears of gratitude. We had done the right thing. This was cooperation, not condemnation. "Thank you," I whispered. Patty stood and leaned in. He gently kissed the baby's forehead. She burst into protest crying, so we all jumped. "I'm sorry," he said, wrapping her swaddle and holding her close. His eyes were soft. "You'll be great," he said, looking at me. "I will be too. I just need time." I nodded. After the lawyers drew up the paperwork, we left the office. Dad met us outside with a stroller and warm smiles for all of us. A couple of weeks later, I had my last meeting with social services. We always dreaded those follow-up checks. We sat in a small office, baby on my lap. The caseworker had stacks of papers, our custody agreement, my notebook of events, the formal DNA results, even the evidence binder I made. She flipped through everyone meticulously, then finally looked at me. The stern look was gone. Now she had a small, understanding smile. "I've seen a lot of cases," she said, "but never one like this. Your documentation is extremely thorough." She lifted the paternity results, then the baby's growth charts. "It's clear you've done everything by the book." Her eyes softened. "We'll close the investigation here. No more actions needed. Just good luck with the baby." I felt a strange weight lift off me. After all these months, it was finally over. As I left the building, I felt lighter than I had in forever. It was raining softly, but for the first time it felt refreshing. On the ride home, my phone buzzed. It was from my old boss. He wanted to settle out of court. He offered 3 months' pay and a neutral reference. I knew it was probably to make it go away. It wasn't a fortune, but it meant I could pay off most of the medical bills we'd racked up and rent for a couple months. I signed the agreement that afternoon. Walking back to the car with the baby settled in her car seat, Dad reached out and squeezed my shoulder. "Hey," he said gently. "I have something to tell you. About Frank." My brows knit as I felt the warm ring of my baby bottle cap. He cleared his throat, looking down at the baby in her car seat as he spoke. "Frank was right. He called me a few times during everything. He said there was something in our family, some, what did he call it, predisposition. But he said no one could know." He shrugged, smiling wryly. "I was so afraid of you thinking we were cursed. I just cut him off." His eyes glistened. "He also said things happen sometimes. You gave a devil's number to beat to conceive." I blinked. It was so silly to think my old-fashioned father had once tried to tell me something, but I just pressed for the details. He looked uncomfortable. I don't think he wanted to talk about it, but he saw I was curious. It was something rare, genetic. Frank wouldn't explain more, but said sometimes daughters carry some trait their mothers do, and that I shouldn't tell you. I nodded slowly. To me, it was no curse. Now I understood. This was nothing more than a bizarre fluke of biology. Weird lab results, yes, but none of it demonic or alien, as the internet crazies had speculated. Frank hadn't believed in curses either, just in genetics. We drove the last block and Dad said, "Look, you can stay as long as you need, Sarah. But I promise, no more secrets. If anything, I'll tell you first." I realized he was crying a little in the rearview mirror, and my heart melted. After everything that happened, this was the most affection I'd felt from him. "I promise," I whispered back. "No more secrets." In the following weeks, a tiny community started to form around us. Jessie from the support group called and invited me and the baby to a little party she was throwing. 5 of the moms with their kids gathered to celebrate me keeping custody. We brought store-bought cake and some of the hand-me-down baby clothes I'd stashed. The kitchen smelled of potluck chili and coffee. There was laughter from other babies pulling at bottles and a toddler eyeing a balloon. Jessie slipped me a piece of my favorite chocolate pie, eyes shining. "Everyone's so proud of you, really," she said quietly. My stomach fluttered. I didn't feel proud at the time, but I was grateful. I told Dad I'd found a part-time job lead through Brody, data entry, work from home, enough to cover a little more of our expenses once the settlement check came. He hugged me for an hour when I got the job, happier about it than I was. By then, Dad was talking to his brother Frank again, little by little. They scheduled a video call. Frank was older, wrinkled at the temples, but kind-faced. He told me how strange it had been to see an article about a virgin pregnancy and then realize it was me, his niece. He said our cases were sitting in a file labeled Group B Anomalies and asked to stay in touch. When my sweet baby saw me watching them on FaceTime, she laughed. That was a new milestone too. We saved the call. One afternoon a month later, Mom simply showed up at the door. She stood holding a wilted bag of groceries, eyes avoiding mine. The baby was napping. I had just folded a pile of tiny onesies. Mom cleared her throat. "I see. I have some." "I have groceries," she said, as if we were old roommates making small talk. Then after a pause, she shrugged off her purse. "Thought you might need more." She took the baby from my arms on autopilot, bouncing her awkwardly as if she hadn't done it in years. The baby immediately grabbed at her finger. Mom looked at her hands, amazed, tears in her eyes. She didn't apologize for anything or explain months of silence. But she stayed for 3 hours, helping me put away food, asking where to find the baby's diapers, and asking if I needed laundry done. She didn't seem much like my mother, more like a distant acquaintance trying not to cry. After she left with another bag of groceries, I sat on the edge of the crib, watching the baby sleep in the little room that was ours. The walls were covered in the cheap glow-in-the-dark stars Dad had plastered above the crib. There was a toy giraffe she had forgotten to play with. Around us, the apartment was finally quiet and safe. The bills were paid up, there was formula in the fridge, and a tiny emerald patch of hope inside me told me we were all right. I reflected on the past year as I watched the steady rise and fall of my daughter's chest. The accusations, the abandonment, the men who showed up claiming fatherhood, the swarm of tests that didn't fit together. The truth had been maddeningly simple after all, an unlucky combination of biology and lab errors. We weren't perfect, just two strong people and an entire support team, figuring this out day by day. But maybe that was enough. In her little sleep giggle, my daughter curled her fingers around the star-patterned blanket. Completely innocent, completely normal. I reached into the crib and brushed her cheek. She opened one eye and smiled at me, a milestone of her own, and my heart swelled. Above us, the glow-in-the-dark stars shone faintly. Out there, the sun was setting on our old life. But in the soft light of our baby's room, I knew the night would be okay. It was strange and scary, but we had made it together. We had survived. And somehow that was enough.